Okay, so policies against sexual harassment. We will now, this end of the morning, we will really try to go into working on policies and try to exchange on what we have and how we can do better. So we understand policy in a broader sense. Policy it's a coherent course of action or a set of rules that is followed by an individual or an organization to deal with a certain type of situation. But that can be not really recorded, that can be informal, that can be recorded in a policy document, that can be a plan, that can be in a law. I mean, we really understand policy here in a broader sense. We would like to exchange really on what exists as practices in your organization. We are aware that there are very different types of actions you can take in your university or in your research organization to combat sexual harassment and harassment based on sex and gender. It can be a formal statement from the university saying that it will be not tolerated. It could be more on collecting data on cases. It could concern an audit to identify risk, and also some attention with to intersection aspects that will reinforce risk of sexual harassment, some vulnerabilities, some link to also LGBTIQ plus aspect, characteristic, the age, the working place environment and all that, you know, really all these things about auditing your risk in your working place. It can also be just raising awareness actions toward the staff or certain categories of the staff. It could be really a training on sexual harassment, again, for some staff like human resources department or people in charge of victims, etc. It can be informal, formal. I mean, there is a wide range of formal, informal ways to report case, etc. From a victim perspective or witness perspective. Thanks, Juliette.
So policies need to be implemented bottom up from the side rather than top down or from the outside in order to be, according to research, be seen as efficient. And finally, the policy process itself, I mean, how we create these policies and strategies, they need to have a very strong mandate from senior management. They need to have resources allocated, and they need to be facilitated by what is seen as legitimate and active case managers. Now, this is a long list of what policies need to have in RPOs in order to be efficient. But interestingly, and a bit problematically, is that even though there's a vast number of journal articles recommending the use of policies as a core preventive measure against sexual harassment, there's almost no evidence-based research on the actual effect of policies on, for example, decreasing the prevalence of sexual harassment. So we don't have data or evidence, I'm using quotation marks for those of you who can't see me, you know, the flicking of the fingers in the air. There's basically no evidence saying that policies in themselves can decrease the prevalence of sexual harassment. And there's actually nothing to suggest that any further efforts to strengthen the impact of policy on sexual harassment, through, for example, information, increased information, more communication, revising policies and so on, that will at all change the underreporting, the policy awareness, or the reporting of behaviors, sexual harassment behaviors as such. So the importance of policy is quite paradoxically highlighted in research, and it puts us in a bit of a weird situation, because we are here to discuss how can we improve and strengthen policy in order to reduce sexual harassment in RPOs, and then the research coming out of the RPOs tells us that policy doesn't matter. There's no evidence base for saying that good policy can lead to a decrease in the actual sexual harassment. So we have a problem. So what do we do then if we're here to discuss policy and improve it? Well, if you go to the next slide, there's always hope, obviously, but what we put what we put our hope to, is this holistic 7 Ps model, where we move away from policy itself and we still tease out 6 other Ps, where policy becomes one of many measures. So, for example, the conventional approach to gender-based violence and sexual harassment is the 3P approach, with prevention, protection, prosecution. The Istanbul Convention adds a 4th P as policy. So the 4P approach is prevention, protection, and policy and prosecution. What the 7 Ps approach does is that it adds partnership and provision of services at specific areas to adopt measures and strategies within. So prevalence is, have I not put prevalence on the slide? Prevalence should be on the slide as well as the main important P. Prevalence and incidence, obviously, as we know, estimates data collection, and they contribute to some form of reasoned and comprehensive and coordinated policy making. If we can't see a link between policy making and prevalence, we have a problem with our policy. And this, I think, relates to what you did in the Lotus Blossom this morning, when you listed one of the groups listed surveys as a way of making the problem visible, and also not only measuring, but as a way of almost, I think, awareness raising. Prevention obviously refers to measures to promote change in the social and cultural patterns of the behavior and attitudes of employees, and it could include awareness raising initiatives or the development of educational materials, the training of professionals, as suggested this morning, perhaps training for all new staff, or potential requirement to become a new employee, and also to link this to policy on recruitment and promotion, that without this training, maybe promotion is not possible. The protection P, the primary objective there is to ensure the safety and to meet the needs of the potential victim survivors. And it comprises cooperative actions to protect potential victim survivors of any form of sexual harassment. And it includes enabling the reporting of the occurrences of potentials for abuse and harassment. So here we saw this morning a few different suggestions on whistleblower functions, or the anonymous complaint procedure, up until 3 anonymous complaints, that would lead to taking an issue forward, the potential of suspensions and other things that you listed on your on the Lotus Blossom. Prosecution, we didn't talk all that much about, perhaps because that's sort of beyond our scope, but that would be the way to think about prosecution beyond within our scope, is to think of disciplinary measures, so that somebody could actually be removed from the research group, or be taken, a grant could be taken away from them if it turns out that they are repeatedly harassing their co-workers. Provision of services refers to services offered to both victim survivors and perpetrators of sexual harassment in universities and research organizations. So it can cover professionals who provide these services, I mean those involved in specialized training, and it can cover the existing tools, so guidelines and learning materials, to assist these in better understanding the needs of the target groups. So, and why not, as you suggested this morning, also for bystanders, there can be provisional services for bystanders to be equipped to better discover and see cases of sexual harassment or incidents of sexual harassment. Partnership in the holistic 7 Ps model relates to the involvement of multiple relevant actors at both sort of at all levels throughout the organization. So what you talked about here this morning in terms of partnerships, or what I think you talked about this morning, was the collaboration between, for example, HR departments and research centers, specifically working on sexual harassment or gender-based violence, or that area, whether it be in gender studies or law or sociology. And then we have the final P, the problematic P, which then is the policy, which refers to in this model, it is the whole coherent set of measures of the 7 Ps with a clear vision, and it needs to have a comprehensive strategy to respond to problems of sexual harassment in a holistic and integral way, i.e. what we are here to deal with. And I'll leave that with this little question mark then, because of the problematic lack of evidence that policy make a difference. probably not what you want to hear, but there it is. Can change slides. Is there any, before we move on with the next area, are there any questions specifically on the 7Ps model? And it comes from some work the Yellow Window did a few years ago, and a study on, I can't remember now if it was gender-based violence in sports or if it was FGM and the risk of FGM. So, but if you Google 7Ps approach and Yellow Window, you will find a report talking about this in more depth, and it will also describe even better than I can do the potential use and the potential advantages of thinking more holistically around sexual harassment and gender-based violence.